Hi, and welcome back to this series on recreating the Skyrim Skill System in Unity 3D. Today we're going to add two new scripts in order to create these scriptable objects and use these reusable objects in order to pass them into animation events so that the player can upgrade his punching and kicking. You will be able to create your own attacks after this, and you really won't have to change much code. We've already got everything set up so that we just call events, and that allows us to see our upgrades in the UI. And those same events could be used in order to play a sound or do a particle effect, whatever you want when the player levels up. Okay, let's navigate to our attacks. I've got a new folder in my scripts called attacks, and I've created these two scripts called AttackList and AttackType. Let's take a look at the AttackList. This is a scriptable object, so I've actually given it a create asset menu attribute, which will allow me to right click in the inspector, create, and find this, create it in the inspector. Okay. So let's go back to the script. Okay, this is just a list of attacks, of attack types. All right, and we're gonna put these attack lists. We're gonna put an attack list onto the player, and the player is gonna call the attack list and initialize the attack. So if it has any attack types on it, it will initialize the attack type. Let's take a look at the attack type. So here we have an attack type, another scriptable object with that same attribute. It's got a governing skill, so for example, if we've got the shooting attack type, the governing skill would be maybe aim or accuracy, something like that. Alright, it's got a base damage and increase per level, which means the amount of damage that it increases per level. So let's say that our base damage is 100, maybe it increases 10 per level. Okay. The base XP for a successful attack, so if you land an attack on an enemy, you'll get a certain amount of XP, and then if you kill an enemy, you get a different amount of XP. Right? Your current damage is keeping track of your base damage plus the damage that you have accrued by increasing your level, and it's the same thing with your current XP per attack and current XP per kill. We have some public properties that give us access to these variables, and then on initialization we're actually going to set everything back to its base level, and then kind of do this the dirty way and increase skill based on the governing skills base current level. So skill again is a scriptable object, and it will save. Okay, so whenever you leave play mode, all of these, anything that's changed on here will keep its value. So it's not like a typical mono behavior class where it's initialized and you change it while you're in play mode, and then it reverts back to its initial level once you leave play mode. This is different. With a scriptable object, all this is going to be the current level, which is the main thing. If you level up to 13, it's going to stay at level 13. Okay, so that's one advantage or disadvantage, depending on how you look at it, of scriptable objects. Okay, so for that reason, what we're doing is we're sending everything back to its base level, and then we're going to increase it based on your skill level. Okay, right, and what that's doing is increasing the amount of damage that you do. It's increasing the amount of XP that you earn per attack and per kill. Good. Now that we have these attack types set up, we're going to go ahead and recreate these ones that I have here. So I'm deleting these, and I'm going to right click, and I'll be able to see this attacks drop down because of that attribute that we've got on those scriptable objects. So if you remember, we put this attribute create asset menu above the class that we made for the attack type. And that's what allows us to right click, see that attacks drop down, and then click new attack type to create a new scriptable object. So make sure you've got yourself some folders set up so it's easy to navigate this. right click, create a new attack type, and we'll create first an attack list, and this is what we're going to put on the player. So this will hold all of the player's different attack types, and then we'll create our 2 attack types. Since we have punching and kicking animations, we'll use those. So go ahead and create a punch attack and a kick attack, and then we'll set up the fields on that. We'll initialize those fields. So make sure that you're bringing in that governing skill. So obviously for punching, for the punch attack, we use the punching skill. We'll set up a base damage. Maybe a punch doesn't do as much damage as a kick, but because you're maybe doing something that's more difficult, you want to reward the player for that. So we'll get a decent amount of XP, especially for kills. Okay, so let's give ourselves 50 XP for a kill, 10 for each attack, and then on kicking we'll make sure that we give it its proper skill. We give it more damage since kicking is more powerful, but maybe the increase per level is less because it's easier to use initially, and then you get maybe maybe you get some XP here for each attack, and then okay, so we're saying 15 XP per attack because maybe it's hard to land a kick, but in order to kill someone with a kick, we'll say that it's easier, so we give less XP for each kill since it does more damage. Okay, make sure that we put those attack types onto the attack list, and then we're going to give those that attack list to the player. So we go ahead and put that onto the attack list field on the combat controller script. So let's go back and take a look at our player. Let's make sure that on our RPG character, right, we've got our player with all of these controllers, the skill user, which is super important for leveling up and stuff, our input controller. I've put that onto my main player object, but the object that gets animated is this RPG character, and this is the part that has an animator controller. And if you have any animations that call animation events, they will call those events, the events will call functions in scripts that exist on the object that's where the animator component is. Okay, so I've got this combat control script on the same object where the animator controller is. Okay, so let's go ahead and open that up. We're going to take a look at some of the new stuff on here. We've got all the stuff from before, but I've added these 2 new things. We've got the attack list. We took a look at that earlier. So we have that, and we're going to initialize that on start. And then we have this new event called onUseAttack. So onUseAttack is just going to, every time that you attack successfully, really what I should do is have this at the end of the hit function. Okay, so every time you attack, should have fixed that before. Every time you attack, you're going to call this onUseAttack function. onUseAttack event, and it's going to say really you don't have to have anything happen. I'm just calling it because, let's say for example, you have an energy system on your player, and you don't want to manually go in here and say, okay, energy system, use energy, 50 calories or whatever. You're just going to have your energy system say, okay, every time an attack is used, depending on the attack type, it'll use such and such amount of energy. Hopefully that made sense. If not, leave a comment and I'll try to explain it better. Okay, so we have this stuff from before, our targeting methods, our finding enemies method. We have that same hit method from before, but now what we're doing is we're passing in this unity type object. I'm calling it attack. We're going to cast it into an attack type. Okay, and if we have an enemy, if we raycast and there is an enemy in front of the player, then we're going to say that we hit it. Okay, so we'll call the enemy and say that it receives a damage equal to the amount of damage of that attack type. So remember that attack type, depending on its skill level, has a certain amount of damage. So this will pass through the current amount of damage on that attack type. The amount of XP that you earn depends on whether or not the enemy is still alive. Okay, so if he's still alive, then you get the XP for attack, and if not, then you get the XP for kill. Then you're saying you're going to pass that level of that amount of XP into your governing skill. So if we're using a punch attack, we're sending this to the punching skill, and we're saying increase by this amount of XP. All right, and then we call the onUse attack event. You know, it's really only in hindsight that you get these ideas that, you know, you've made a mistake or whatever. Here, I think that I've made a mistake in saying that we should put in a base damage adder. What you really probably want to do is have like a base damage multiplier, so that you take whatever attack you're doing and you just multiply it by this amount. So whenever you're level 1 or even level 0 or whatever, you just started the game, maybe you're so bad that you have a non-1 damage multiplier, right? So you would be dealing less than what the base damage for a weapon might be. Or let's say that you have a fixed amount of damage that like a punch would do. Instead of doing that amount, you would do less than that or more than that based on your skill. Hopefully I've gotten that across clearly. If not, put something in the comments and I'll try to explain that more clearly. All right, now that we've got our player set up with his attacks and his attack list, we've got these attack types all set up. We're going to use these attack types and pass them into animations, so that when we complete an animation, when we get to the peak of an animation, you know, the pinnacle where we've struck the enemy with our punch or our kick, we're going to pass in the attack type, and we are going to do the damage that we've set up in all these scripts that I've just shown you. Okay, so what we need to do now is import it, go to our imported assets, or wherever you keep your Explosive LLC folder with the RPG animations, or whatever your animations folder happens to be. Alright, I'm going into my unarmed animations. Now these first animations are these first 8 animations are the ones that we're going to use. I will preface this with the fact that I don't like this method. I think that this is using animation events like this is kind of hiding the way that you're calling code, but it is the most, maybe it's the easiest, the simplest way of doing things. Okay, so go ahead and click on your animation FBX, go to the animation tab, and then come down here to this events drop down. You're going to see a timeline here with a little bookmark looking thing. Another reason why I'm not especially fond of this way of doing things is that, you know, this little bookmark is kind of hard to see. You'll see that when you click on it, you've got these 4 parameters plus a function name. Now, if you remember, we've got this function on a script on our character called hit, right? So in our CombatControl, we've got that hit function. This is what we're going to call in this animation event. All right. And what we're going to pass is a Unity Engine object. Okay, this isn't your typical C object. This is a Unity Engine object. So this kind of allows us to cast it into what we want from the Unity namespace. All right, from the Unity Engine namespace. So this is a kick animation, right? And at this point, look, let's take a look right there. At this point, if you're taking a look here at the animation, you can see this is the pinnacle that I was talking about. Right here, it's going to call that animation event, and it's going to call that function hit. So at this point, we're going to pass through an attack type. We're going to pass in the kick attack. and we're making sure that it is the kick attack type, right? So in parentheses, it'll show you what type of object it is. Now we need to make sure that we press apply. Okay, perfect. So that will go ahead and pass through the attack type. I'm gonna do this for both of our kicks, and then we're gonna test this out to make sure that it's working. So go ahead and go down to this next, go down to the event here. You'll see that it's the exact same name function. So that's important. If you're setting up your own animation events, make sure that you're calling the same function for the same type of actions. Okay. So we pass in our kick attack, we press apply. Now I'm going to go ahead and go in, I'm going to press play, I'm going to go target a, let me make sure, yeah, there we go. So I'm targeting that cop, I'm targeting the lady, and kicking, punching, right? So it worked, it seems to have worked, right? And I've actually just leveled up my kicking. So we can see that it works. Again, I will say that this is the simplest way of doing things. If you wanted to do it a different way, you would probably have to, let's say for example, if we're just looking at the animated guy here, you could put a collider onto your fist, right? And you could say, okay, if this collider is hitting an enemy, then we'll do some damage. The problem is, then you go into like a running, you're blocking or you're jumping or you're running, and then you accidentally hit an enemy, and really it's not ideal if you're doing damage while you're jumping. Okay, so that, you know, you're swinging the arms, and in that arm swing you might hit an enemy or something like that. And then another thing is, if you're using a collider, it's constantly checking to see if it's colliding with something. So it's not super efficient. All right. There are different strategies that you could use in order to do this. I would say that this is the simplest. For now, until you find a better way to do it, I think this is a pretty decent way to do it. Okay. Now, the next 6 animations are punching animations. So I'm going to go ahead and put you guys on fast forward, and I'll set these up. Now we'll test out the punching animations with their new punch attack types. Oops, that's a kick. Alright, so let's punch. Good, it's working. Right, so if this weren't working, then we wouldn't see that particle effect. And obviously we just leveled up, so you can tell that it's working. Alright, it looks decent. And you could tell that I had already leveled up my punch attack to a certain extent, and it saved that. So you see here that that current level actually stays after we leave play mode, and then we'll go back into play mode, and you'll see that once I level up again, yeah, it actually saves the level that I had left play mode in. So hopefully this strategy works for you guys. Hopefully this series has been helpful to you all. We'll take a quick review of everything that we've done today. Alright, as far as code, we really haven't changed or added that much. We added 2 scripts, and then here on the combat controller, which was previously the combat test component, we added this field AttackList, which just holds all of the players' attack types, right? And on start, what we're going to do, and this is super important, is initialize all those attacks, and we'll take a look at what that does. So on the attack list, we have a list of all those attack types that we want to be able to use on the player. From the combat control, or from somewhere, you have to initialize all these attacks. So I'm initializing from combat control, and for each of these attack types, if there are any, we will initialize the attack type, which sets up the base damage, and if it's got any skill on it, what I should say is if the skill is developed, right, so if the punching skill is developed, then we're going to increase the skill on this attack type to match the skill on the governing skill. All right, and then we're going to listen for increases. Excuse me, the governing skill is going to listen for increases of skill on this attack type. All right. As far as the way that we're increasing the skill, it happens here in this function hit. This, right, so let's make a comment here. This is one reason why I didn't like animation events, is because you see this 0 references, and maybe you think, okay, well then it's safe to take out of the solution. It's not, because we're calling it from animation events. Okay, so it might be nice to have a comment about where you're getting this call from, because otherwise it could be confusing, right? So we're passing in that attack type object. It's actually just a basic object. We're casting it into an attack type, and then if we have an enemy in front of the player, then it will receive damage equal to the damage of its current damage level, right? So if it's an increased skill, if it's a skill that's at a higher level, then it'll increase the amount of damage that the enemy takes. Then we're going to pass some XP to the governing skill, and we'll fire the on-use attack event regardless of whether or not we hit an enemy or not, right? So like I said before, if you want to do something like in Skyrim where maybe you're casting a magic spell, you want to decrease mana, or you're doing a sword attack, you're decreasing stamina. So you could use this event in order to do that, right? So you're passing through here the attack type. Maybe you can develop this out, right? So you create another skill, or excuse me, another attack type. So you say a magic attack that derives from this attack type, and then you can add another float that says mana cost or stamina cost or whatever. So some ideas there for you. Okay. The main thing that we did in order to get this to work was go into our animations and make sure that we implemented our animation events. Okay, so if you want to add an event, you click here on the timeline, and you can, move that event around. Make sure that when you use it, you're actually calling a function that exists on one of your scripts. Otherwise, let's take a look at what happens. All right, so this is on a kick. You're going to see in the console here. Oops. You're going to see in the console here that when I do that kick, we will have a problem. Let me restart this here because I pressed play while I hadn't applied the changes. So you'll see that this error where we're trying to call this new event function and it doesn't exist, right? It has no receiver. So anytime you add an animation event, make sure that it's calling a function that actually exists on the components that exist where your animator component is. So again, super important. We have this CombatControl script on the object where the animator component is, because this is where those events, where those messages are sent. Okay, so these events are really just sending a message to all the components on where the animator component is and saying, okay, if there's an event called hit, then do whatever's in there. All right, go ahead and delete that and apply the changes. Okay. Another thing that y'all need to be aware of is that if you create another attack type, right, and you create that skill, you must put that skill onto the player. Okay, so I've created this two-hand skill. I need to make sure that I actually put that skill onto the player. Otherwise, the UI won't update. Your skill will update, but the UI won't, and the player's perks and stuff won't update. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys this project with my code. Obviously I can't include any of Explosive LLC's or Synty Studios assets. So go ahead and download this on GitHub. It'll include that message that you see there. It'll include all of this UI information. So you get a pretty decent package all for free. Thanks a lot for watching this series. I'll talk to you next time.